If you're over 60, some of the everyday habits that can put extra strain on your kidneys may be hiding in places you'd never think to look. I'm talking about things millions of people do every single day because they seem completely normal. One has nothing to do with food at all. Another may be sitting in your medicine cabinet right now. A third can hide in foods that don't even taste particularly salty. And the final one is part of an eating pattern so common that many people barely give it a second thought. They don't feel dangerous. They feel familiar. And something you've done for years without an obvious problem can be very easy to dismiss. But after 60, that familiarity can become misleading. Your kidneys have been filtering your blood around the clock for decades. And as the years pass, kidney function, blood vessels, blood pressure, and other parts of your health can change. That doesn't mean turning 60 suddenly makes ordinary habits dangerous. It means something your body seemed to handle easily at 40 may deserve more attention at 60, 70, or beyond. And this isn't about frightening you into giving up everything you enjoy. It's about recognizing the habits that have become automatic, understanding where the real risks are, and making practical changes where they actually matter. But before the first habit makes sense, there's one thing worth understanding. Why can the same everyday habit matter differently to your kidneys now than it did decades earlier? Your kidneys are doing far more work behind the scenes than most people ever notice. They continuously filter your blood, removing waste and helping your body get rid of extra fluid. They also help regulate things like blood pressure and the balance of certain minerals in your body. And they do all of this quietly. You don't feel your kidneys filtering your blood. You don't notice them adjusting fluid levels. And that's part of what makes kidney problems so easy to miss. Early changes in kidney function may not cause obvious symptoms. You may still feel completely normal. Now, that doesn't mean turning 60 suddenly gives you kidney disease. But the kidneys you have today aren't necessarily working under exactly the same conditions they were decades ago. Kidney function can change with age. Blood vessels can change. And health problems that affect the kidneys become more common. Two of the biggest concerns are high blood pressure and diabetes. Over time, poorly controlled blood pressure can damage the small blood vessels the kidneys depend on. Persistently high blood sugar can also damage their delicate filtering system. And that's why an everyday habit doesn't necessarily need to affect the kidneys directly to matter. If it repeatedly pushes your blood pressure, blood sugar, or other health risks in the wrong direction, it can still become part of the problem over time. So the question isn't, did this habit hurt me when I was younger? It's, does this habit still make sense for the body I have today? And that brings us to the first one. You don't eat it. You don't drink it. And you definitely won't find it on a nutrition label. It's sitting too much. And that may sound strange. You're not eating anything unhealthy. You're not taking a medication. You're simply sitting in a chair, watching television, reading, working, or relaxing. So what could that possibly have to do with your kidneys? First, let's clear up one misconception. Sitting for an hour doesn't suddenly cut off blood flow to your kidneys or damage them. That's not the concern. The bigger issue is what can happen when too little movement becomes your everyday routine. Long periods of inactivity can make it harder to manage body weight, blood sugar, blood pressure, and overall metabolic health. And remember what we just talked about. High blood pressure and diabetes are two major threats to kidney health. So sitting isn't necessarily harming your kidneys just because you're sitting in one particular moment. The concern is what too little movement can contribute to when it becomes a regular part of your life. And after 60, it's surprisingly easy for that to happen. Maybe you used to walk to work, spend more time on your feet, or stay busy running errands. Now you may drive more, sit longer in the evening, or simply have fewer reasons to move throughout the day. None of those changes feels dramatic. But they can add up over months and years. The good news is that changing this habit doesn't mean suddenly joining a gym or forcing yourself through exhausting workouts. Start much smaller. Get up and move around the house after you've been sitting for a while. Take a short walk outside if you're able. Stand and stretch while you're waiting for the kettle or microwave. And if walking is difficult, movement doesn't have to disappear completely. Depending on your abilities, gentle chair-based movement may be an option too. The goal isn't to go from barely moving to intense exercise overnight. It's to spend a little less of the day completely still and gradually build from there. Because movement you can repeat consistently is far more useful than an ambitious routine you abandon after a few days. So if you always thought kidney health began and ended with what was on your plate, this is the first belief worth changing. Sometimes an important risk factor isn't on your plate at all. It's how much of your day passes without much movement. But the next habit is very different. You may actually be taking it because you're trying to feel better. And there's a good chance some version of it is sitting in your medicine cabinet right now. A headache shows up. Your back starts aching. Your knees hurt after a long day. So you reach for a familiar pain reliever. For many people, that means a type of medicine called an NSAID, including common drugs like ibuprofen and naproxen. These medicines can be very useful. They help reduce pain and inflammation, which is exactly why millions of people rely on them. But here's where familiarity can become misleading. You can buy many of these medicines without a prescription. But over-the-counter doesn't automatically mean appropriate for frequent use. NSAIDs work partly by blocking substances involved in pain and inflammation. That's part of what makes them useful. But some of those same substances also help maintain the blood flow your kidneys need to keep filtering properly. Certain pain medicines can interfere with those signals, especially when the kidneys are already under stress. And that's when the situation becomes more important. Maybe you're dehydrated from an illness, or simply haven't been drinking much. Maybe your kidney function is already reduced. Maybe you have high blood pressure, heart problems, or you're taking other medications that affect the kidneys or fluid balance. In those situations, something you've taken many times before may deserve a very different level of caution. Now, if you're thinking, I took ibuprofen yesterday. Did I damage my kidneys? That's not the message. Occasional, appropriate use doesn't automatically mean kidney damage. The bigger concern is frequent use, higher doses, or repeatedly taking these medicines on your own, especially when other kidney risk factors are already present. And there's another mistake that's easy to make. The same active ingredient, or another NSAID, can sometimes appear in products sold under different names. You might take one medicine for pain, then later reach for another product without realizing you're taking overlapping medicines. That's why the label matters. Check the active ingredients rather than relying only on the brand name or what the front of the package says. And if you're using pain relievers regularly, talk with a healthcare professional or pharmacist about whether that pattern makes sense for you. They can help you consider your kidney function, health conditions, other medications, and whether a different approach to managing the pain may be appropriate. And don't suddenly stop a prescribed medication because of something you heard in a video. The mistake isn't taking medicine when you genuinely need it. It's assuming that something familiar must be harmless simply because you can buy it without a prescription. And number 2 is even harder to spot. You can stop adding salt at the table. You can leave the salt shaker untouched for weeks. And still be eating far more sodium than you realize. If you're thinking, I barely put salt on my food, you may be looking in the wrong place. A large amount of the sodium in many people's diets can come from packaged, prepared, and restaurant foods. Bread, sauces, soups, deli meats, frozen meals, packaged snacks. And here's what makes it easy to underestimate. A food doesn't have to taste extremely salty to contain a meaningful amount of sodium. Most people don't bite into a slice of bread and think, that's salty. But imagine bread at breakfast, a sandwich at lunch, a sauce later in the day, then a packaged or restaurant meal for dinner. One serving may not look like much. It's the total across the day that can surprise you. And high sodium intake matters to kidney health largely because of its relationship with fluid balance and blood pressure. Your kidneys help regulate sodium and fluid in your body. And in people who are sensitive to sodium, consistently high intake can contribute to higher blood pressure. High blood pressure matters here for a very specific reason. Over time, poorly controlled blood pressure can damage the blood vessels the kidneys depend on. And the relationship can work in both directions. High blood pressure can contribute to kidney damage. And when kidney function is reduced, controlling blood pressure can become more difficult. Restaurant meals add another challenge because you don't always know exactly how much sodium went into the food before it reached your table. So a good place to start is with the label. Look at the sodium amount, Then check the serving size. Is that sodium amount for the entire package, or only one serving? If you eat 2 or 3 servings, you're also getting 2 or 3 times the sodium listed for one serving. And compare similar products when you can. Foods that look almost identical can contain surprisingly different amounts of sodium. Cooking more meals from basic ingredients can also give you more control when it's practical. And less sodium doesn't have to mean less flavor. Herbs, spices, garlic, lemon, lime, and other seasonings can add plenty of flavor without relying entirely on salt. The goal isn't to become afraid of sodium. And it isn't to assume everyone needs exactly the same limit. If you have kidney disease, high blood pressure, heart problems, or another condition that affects your needs, ask your healthcare professional what sodium range makes sense for you. For everyone else, the first step is much simpler. Know where your sodium is actually coming from. Because sometimes the saltiest habit in your diet doesn't taste very salty at all. But now we're down to number 1. And its biggest concern isn't necessarily what happens today. It's what can happen when the same eating habits continue for years. Number 1 isn't about 1 spoonful of sugar. It's not about having a piece of cake at a birthday party. And it certainly doesn't mean sugar is some kind of poison. The bigger concern is a dietary pattern built around sugary drinks, excess calories, and heavily refined foods that show up again and again. A sweetened coffee in the morning. A sugary cereal or pastry for breakfast. A soda with lunch. Cookies in the afternoon. White bread, crackers, or other heavily refined foods appearing throughout the day. None of those choices automatically means kidney trouble. The concern is what those everyday choices can contribute to over months and years. And the strongest kidney connection begins with something most people have heard about, but may not fully connect to their kidneys. Type 2 diabetes. Eating sugar does not automatically give you diabetes. Your risk depends on many things, including genetics, age, body weight, physical activity, and your overall eating pattern. But a long-term diet that regularly provides more calories than your body needs, especially when it's heavy in sugary drinks and highly refined foods, can contribute to weight gain and metabolic problems that increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. And that's where the kidney connection becomes much more serious. When blood glucose remains too high over time, it can gradually damage the kidney's delicate filtering structures. There may be no pain, and the early changes may not give you an obvious warning. That's why the better question isn't, "Did I eat dessert tonight?" It's, "What does my usual diet look like, week after week and year after year?" And there's another distinction worth making. Carbohydrates themselves aren't automatically the problem. Whole grains, beans, vegetables, and whole fruits contain carbohydrates too. The word carbohydrate alone doesn't tell you whether a food is a problem. What matters much more is the overall pattern, including how often heavily refined foods and added sugars are replacing more nutrient and fiber-rich choices. Sugary drinks are especially easy to underestimate. You can consume a lot of sugar and calories in a short time without the same fullness you might get from eating a meal. And because it's a drink, you may barely register it as part of what you've consumed that day. A soda with lunch. Something sweet later in the afternoon. Maybe another sweetened drink with dinner. Before long, it can simply become part of the routine. And after 60, this deserves even more attention because type 2 diabetes becomes more common with age, and some people can have elevated blood sugar without obvious symptoms. So don't build your entire strategy around avoiding birthday cake. Look at what happens repeatedly. What do you drink most days? What do you eat most mornings? What do you reach for when you're hungry? One dessert isn't the story. One slice of white bread isn't the story. One sweetened coffee isn't the story. The pattern is the story. And if that pattern eventually contributes to diabetes, there's another question most people never think to ask. If high blood sugar started affecting your kidneys, would you actually know it? Not necessarily. And that's one reason the diabetes-kidney connection deserves so much attention. Inside your kidneys are millions of tiny filtering units working around the clock to clean your blood. When blood glucose stays too high for too long, those delicate structures can gradually become damaged. And the important word there is gradually. At first, you may feel completely normal. Your kidneys can continue doing their job even while early changes are developing. That's one reason diabetes and kidney disease can be such a quiet combination. Diabetes is a major cause of chronic kidney disease. But kidney problems related to diabetes usually don't announce themselves the moment they begin. That's why waiting for obvious kidney symptoms isn't a reliable strategy. If you have diabetes or have been told your blood sugar is high, managing it isn't only about how you feel today. It's also about reducing the risk of complications that can build over time, including kidney problems. And because early kidney changes may not be obvious, regular medical follow-up matters. Your healthcare professional can decide what monitoring makes sense based on your blood sugar, blood pressure, medications, kidney function, and overall health. So understanding the risk is one thing. Changing the everyday habit behind it is another. If sugary drinks and refined foods have become part of your routine, where's the easiest place to start? Start with what you drink. Not because you need to rebuild your entire diet overnight, but because drinks can be one of the easiest repeated sources of added sugar and calories to change. Think about what normally shows up in your day: soda, sweetened tea, energy drinks, some fruit drinks, or a coffee that contains far more sugar than you realize. You don't necessarily need to eliminate every carbohydrate from your diet. And you don't have to swear off dessert for the rest of your life. Instead, ask yourself, what am I consuming again and again that I could change without making my entire diet miserable? Then start with one. Maybe one daily soda becomes water or sparkling water. Maybe you gradually make your tea less sweet. Maybe you choose an unsweetened drink with lunch. Maybe you slowly reduce the syrup or sugar in a coffee you drink every day. You don't need to do all of them. Start with the change that feels realistic enough to repeat. Because a change you can comfortably repeat is far more useful than a perfect diet you can only tolerate for 3 days. Once you've looked at drinks, you can apply the same idea to foods that appear repeatedly. Maybe it's a sugary breakfast. Maybe it's a heavily processed snack you eat almost every afternoon. Look for opportunities to replace some of those repeated choices with foods that provide more fiber and nutrition. The goal isn't to fear carbohydrates. It's to make your usual choices a little better. And that's important because the habits we've talked about didn't become meaningful because you did them once. They became meaningful because they became part of everyday life. And that means the opposite can be true too. A healthier choice, repeated often enough, can become part of everyday life as well. But here's what makes this bigger than any single food, drink, medicine, or activity. All 4 habits connect to kidney health in different ways. Too little movement can contribute to problems with metabolic health, blood sugar, body weight, and blood pressure. Certain pain relievers can interfere with the blood flow your kidneys depend on, particularly when other risk factors are present. Too much sodium can make blood pressure control harder. And a poor long-term diet can increase the risk of metabolic problems and type 2 diabetes. So the 4 habits weren't random. Each one creates a different kind of pressure on kidney health. One through the health effects associated with too little movement. One through the effects certain medications can have on kidney blood flow. One through blood pressure. And one through long-term metabolic health and diabetes. That's the bigger lesson. Protecting your kidneys isn't about discovering one miracle food. And it isn't about finding one ingredient to fear for the rest of your life. It's about recognizing the health pressures that can keep showing up day after day and year after year. But there's one problem. You can't always tell how those pressures are affecting you simply by how you feel. That's why knowing your numbers matters. Know your blood pressure. Know whether your blood sugar is in a healthy range. And when appropriate, know how your kidneys are actually functioning. Because kidney health isn't something you can reliably judge from symptoms alone. Feeling well doesn't automatically tell you how well your kidneys are filtering. That's why appropriate medical testing matters. Your healthcare professional can use blood and urine tests, together with your overall health history, to get a clearer picture of how your kidneys are doing. And if you've already been diagnosed with kidney disease, be especially careful with generic advice you find online. The right amount of sodium, potassium, protein, or fluid can differ depending on your kidney function, medications, other health conditions, and individual needs. So follow the guidance that's been individualized for you rather than assuming every kidney diet or health tip applies to everyone. Knowing your habits matters. But knowing what's actually happening inside your body matters too. And when kidney disease is already present, those individual details become even more important. The biggest kidney risks aren't always dramatic enough to get your attention. Sometimes they simply become so familiar that you stop noticing them. And that's really the point of this video. Pay attention to what has become automatic. None of this means you should leave afraid of sitting down, eating dessert, or taking medicine when you need it. Protecting your health after 60 isn't about chasing perfection. It's about recognizing the repeated habits that matter and making better choices where you realistically can. Think back over the 4 habits we covered. Which one made you stop and think, "Wait, I do that"? Maybe that's your place to start. You don't need to change everything tomorrow. One realistic improvement you can keep doing is a better starting point than trying to change everything at once. Because ultimately, this isn't about being afraid of getting older. It's about protecting the things that matter as you get older. Your ability to stay active, to make your own choices, to take care of yourself, and to keep as much independence as possible for the years ahead. If someone in your family is over 60 and regularly uses pain relievers, struggles with blood pressure or diabetes, or simply wants to protect their kidney health, send them this video. And tell us in the comments, which of the 4 surprised you most? Sitting too much? Pain relievers? Hidden sodium? Or the long-term sugar and refined food pattern? And subscribe to Health Lab Digest for simple, research-based health information designed to help you make smarter everyday decisions after 60. Because the habits that shape your health tomorrow are often the ordinary ones you're repeating today.